Welcome back everyone to another episode of Access Insights. Today we have on Martin. Martin, it's so great to have you on today.
Oh, lovely to be here, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So for those people who don't really know about Unleashed, could you give a brief overview about that, please?
Yeah, of course. So we set up Unleashed just over 2.5 years ago now, and we're a business that specialises in inclusive talent management. So I guess the easiest way to explain that is that we work with businesses, organisations and individuals to help remove some of the systemic barriers that exist in organisations to make sure that people can reach their untapped potential in organisations.
Amazing. It's a great explanation. So so I kind of want to know about the story. Like, what is it that inspired you to start Unleashed?
That's a good question. Normally one that requires several glasses of vino to get that answer, but I will do my best to try and consolidate it for you. For me, Unleashed is an incredibly personal venture. I worked, and the same for all the team that work here actually, we've all at some point overcome barriers within an organisation and are determined to leave a better kind of path for those behind us versus some of the ones that we had to tread, I guess. One of the primary things I found before Unleashed working in lots of corporate organisations is in some organisations there is bad intent. More often than not, there's good intent, but just, I guess, kind of a lack of knowledge or awareness around people that are different to themselves. And I worked in a lot of companies that were very homogenous, like with the same types of groups of people. One of the first companies I ever worked in was 96% white men, for example. And I remember hearing kind of like corridor conversations or conversations taking place between people that the idea of having a woman in leadership or management role was something that would blow their mind. And none of that stuff made sense to me because I was like, well, people are people, right? And actually, the more diversity of thought you've got in a business, the more successful that business will be. Absolutely. And so through working in those businesses and seeing the challenges and the views and the opinions firsthand of people, a lot of it came down to either fear or a lack of awareness or education. And so we set out on a mission basically to try and help people eradicate some of those views, those beliefs or myths around diversity and inclusion. And also the other thing to make it successful is to make it accessible and easy. So if something's difficult to do, people won't do it because we're creatures of habit. So you have to correct the system, the processes that exist around the business, like recruitment, talent, etc., to make that work. I was on the receiving end of a lot of discrimination in my early days. So I'm an openly gay man. I came out when I was 16 and I experienced an awful lot of homophobia in my early career. And I watched a lot of women experience a lot of sexism. And I watched a lot of Black and brown people I worked with face racism. And so I guess you kind of bond with people through some of those kind of shared experiences. And whilst I don't know what it's like to be of differing gender, I do not know what it's like to experience racism. I do know what it's like to experience discrimination, and it's a horrible feeling, and no one should have to experience that in the workplace. And so it developed a great deal of empathy in me for others that were, I guess, different and didn't kind of fit the archetypes at the time in some of those businesses, the dominant population. And so have kind of secretly, at the start in the early days, kind of secretly squirreled away to try and fix some of those problems in-house. And as my confidence and networking abilities grew over the years, doing it far more overtly and planned, I guess, to be able to make those changes in business.
Amazing. Wow. So what I kind of want to understand is that during your journey in this, what did you find was like what challenges did you like come across during starting Unleashed? Actually, yeah, that'd be interesting to know.
So, that's a really good question. So when starting the business, that was a really interesting time. So I thought it would be a really clever idea to launch the business at the start of a global pandemic, which timing wise could not have been more perfect, as you can imagine. We had grand plans. We'd done a lot of planning in the 6 months up to launching the business. We'd got clients secured. We'd done our homework, and then the global pandemic kicked in and everything stopped. And so we really had to pivot and start over again, almost like relaunching a new business twice in those first 6 months. And so what it taught me even more is the need for the work that we do. There were so many people at that time that were really struggling, that were not in a great space, and you could see the inequity growing in that scenario where particularly for ethnicity, sexual orientation, ability, I noticed a lot of people that were instantly almost disadvantaged because of the backdrop of the pandemic. And so that said, there were some green shoots that came through at the same time. So whilst an awful, tragic incident with George Floyd's murder, what was interesting is how society started to react. I noticed a difference in the conversation with people, particularly in the profession, that we'd been trying to bang down some of those doors for years and couldn't get the conversation on the table. All of a sudden, it was something that people were acutely aware of and were starting to talk about. And so whilst absolutely, you do not want, a horrific instance like that, and you do not want, the backdrop of a global pandemic, but what it did create was the perfect storm and the right vehicle for us to really start having difficult and enlightening conversations with people that then made them more receptive to, actually, we recognize we don't want to do these things, or we were unaware that we were behaving in a certain way or hadn't got the right processes in around this. How do we fix this so that we aren't impacting people negatively anymore? And so from that then grew the business kind of bit by bit, iteratively. Started with just me on day one, and now we are a team of 15 people with a pool of associates with lots of different products and services. So it kind of shows you it can be done even in the backdrop of I guess some of the worst scenarios, right?
Of course, absolutely. And just taking it back to some of those conversations you had, I mean, I'm pretty sure they required a lot of transparency, and like a lot of companies are trying to be a bit more transparent in these processes. And I think it's like, what would you say, like, was it the hardest part? Was it trying to convince these companies that they needed some flights, or is it for them to, they actually came to that realization that, they actually want to make a change, they want to make a difference, and that's what led the business in that way?
I would say it was definitely a combination of both. We had an awful lot of people that had kind of realised and contacted us to say, look, we need help on this. We're not really sure where to start. We know we're not getting everything right. Our people are telling us that, but we don't know what to do to course correct it or to fix it. And then there was, I guess, a group of people that we knew of where we were able to have those more proactive conversations to say, you may not be aware, but this is how either your organisation's showing up, or these are some of the observations we've made, and there's a way that you can make life better and easier and more equitable. And in my experience, seldom few people don't want to do that. They just don't know how to do it. And so having those conversations is the catalyst to start that change.
Amazing.